The rain had begun its rhythmic monologue hours ago, a soft, insistent whisper against the tall windows of the manor. It was the kind of night that invited introspection, a deep breath, and a slow surrender to the senses. Ilara stood by the hearth, the flickering amber of the fire painting shifting shadows across the silk of her robe. It was a deep amethyst, the color of twilight just before the stars pierced through, and its fabric flowed around her like liquid desire. She had chosen it with deliberate care, just as she had chosen the delicate scent of sandalwood and rose that now clung to her skin, a subtle invitation. The house, ancient and elegant, breathed around her. The scent of old leather and polished wood mingled with the burning embers, a rich, grounding aroma that always reminded her of sanctuary. Tonight, however, it felt less like a sanctuary, and more like a carefully constructed stage, awaiting its most vital player. Every detail, from the low lamplight casting pools of warmth on the Persian rugs to the crystal decanter of amber liquid glinting on a nearby mahogany table, seemed to hum with anticipation. Her fingers traced the cool rim of a half-empty wineglass, the ruby liquid within reflecting the fire's dance. She had been here for a week, secluded, allowing the city's cacophony to recede, preparing herself. Not just physically, though the long-scented baths and the careful grooming had been part of the ritual, but emotionally. She needed to shed the layers of the world, to re-enter a space where only Wainthiegs existed, where their history, their unspoken language, and their undeniable connection could finally breathe again. A gust of wind rattled the panes, a sigh from the world outside, but within, the air was still heavy, with a different kind of storm. Ilara closed her eyes, letting the heat of the fire seep into her, a warmth that was both comforting and a prelude to something far more potent. She remembered the last time she had felt this particular kind of quiet, charged waiting. It had been years ago, in a different city, a different life. Yet the core emotion was identical, an aching, thrilling certainty that the universe was about to tilt on its axis. Julian. His name was a silent hum in her veins, a melody she had tried, and failed, to forget. He was a force of nature, a man carved from shadow and light, with eyes that saw into the very core of her being. Their story was not simple. It was woven with threads of forbidden desires, painful partings, and magnetic reunions. They were two celestial bodies, irrevocably bound by an unseen gravity, destined to orbit each other, sometimes colliding with breathtaking force. Tonight, the orbit was bringing them closer than ever. He was late, of course. Julian was never truly on time, always arriving precisely when his presence would have the most profound impact, when the longing in her would be a tangible thing, humming just beneath her skin. She preferred it that way, the slow build-up, the exquisite torment of anticipation. It made the eventual touch, the first shared glance, all the more potent, all the more devastating. She walked to the large bay window, pulling back the heavy velvet curtain just enough to peer out into the inky blackness. The rain had intensified, a silver curtain falling between her and the sprawling grounds. A lone lantern by the gate cast a dim, shifting glow, barely penetrating the deluge. Nothing. Not yet. A faint smile touched her lips. He liked to make an entrance. He liked to observe her, she knew, before making himself known. He enjoyed the play, the dance, the tantalizing slow burn. And she, despite herself, despite the years of trying to be pragmatic, to be sensible, was utterly captivated by his particular brand of theater. With Julian, life was always lived in heightened color, in a constant state of delicious suspense. She moved back to the fire, picking up the crystal decanter. Her hand trembled slightly as she poured a fresh measure of wine. It was a nervous tremor, yes, but also one of pure excitement. Her pulse thrummed in her wrists, a steady rhythm mirroring the rain outside. She thought of his hands, strong, calloused, capable of both immense tenderness and a searing possessiveness that thrilled her to her core. She imagined them on her skin, tracing the delicate curve of her collarbone, sliding down her back, igniting a trail of fire everywhere they touched. A memory surfaced, unbidden, from their last encounter, nearly 2 years ago. A secluded beach house, the roar of the ocean a counterpoint to the rush of blood in her ears. He had found her by the window, watching the storm, much like tonight. Without a word, he had simply come up behind her, his arms circling her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. The scent of him, salt, rain, and something uniquely Julian, had filled her senses, overwhelming everything else. He had rested his chin on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck, and she had felt his heart beating against her back, a wild, untamed rhythm that resonated with her own. He hadn't spoken, just held her, and in that silent embrace every boundary, every inhibition had simply dissolved. She shivered, a delicious tremor that had nothing to do with the cool air. The memory was so vivid, so real, she could almost feel the phantom weight of his body against hers, the whisper of his lips against her ear, the unspoken promise in his touch. This was what he did to her. He stripped away the veneer of her everyday life, revealing the raw, passionate woman beneath, the one who craved his touch, his presence, his intoxicating darkness. A sudden, sharp flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed almost immediately by a rumble of thunder that vibrated through the floorboards. It was a dramatic flourish, a perfect seagay. Ilara's breath hitched. She knew with an instinct that bypassed logic that he was here. She hadn't heard a car, no crunch of tires on gravel, no distinct sound over the rain, but she felt him. It was a deep, primal awareness, a shift in the very atmosphere of the house. She stood perfectly still, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't need to look out the window again. The lantern by the gate would now be shining on a dark, sleek car, and a figure would be making their way up the path. He would be drenched, perhaps, but it wouldn't matter. He would carry the storm with him, and in his wake a different kind of heat would rise. A soft click echoed through the silence of the house, the faint sound of the front door being unlatched. It wasn't loud, not intrusive, but to Ilara's hypersensitive ears, it was like a drumbeat. She didn't move towards it. She couldn't. Her feet felt rooted to the spot, her gaze fixed on the entrance to the drawing room, where the long, dark hallway lay beyond. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of the hall. He appeared, not striding but flowing into the room, a creature of the night itself. Julian? He was even more magnificent than her memory had painted him. His dark hair was slick with rain, clinging to his forehead, giving him a wild, untamed look. His tailored coat, dark as the storm outside, was damp, but he wore it with an effortless grace that made it seem like a second skin. His eyes, those piercing, intelligent eyes, were fixed on her, and in their depths she saw a familiar blend of hunger, possessiveness, and a deep, knowing tenderness that was reserved only for her. A slow, devastating smile spread across his lips, and it was as if the very air in the room thickened, charged with an invisible current. He didn't speak, not yet. He simply stood there, allowing her to take him in, allowing the years, the distance, the unspoken desires to rush between them, like a torrent. Ilara felt a flush rise to her cheeks, a heat that spread through her veins. She was suddenly acutely aware of her own body, the way the silk robe clung to her, the way her nipples had tightened beneath the fabric. His gaze was a physical touch, tracing the line of her throat, lingering on the swell of her breasts, descending to the curve of her hip. It was an intimate exploration, a silent claiming, and she found herself arching almost imperceptibly towards him. A silent plea. He took a step, then another. His movements fluid, unhurried. Each step was a deliberate act, closing the space between them, amplifying the tension to an almost unbearable pitch. The scent of him reached her now, a potent mix of rain-soaked earth, his own unique musk, and a faint hint of expensive whiskey. It was intoxicating, a scent that had haunted her dreams for years. "Ilara?" he finally said, his voice a low rumble, rich and warm, like aged brandy. It was a sound that vibrated through her, awakening every dormant nerve ending. It was a caress in itself. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Julian," she managed, her voice a breathy whisper. He stopped just a few feet from her, close enough for her to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the tiny droplets of water clinging to his lashes. His eyes were dark, stormy grey, reflecting the firelight, and they held hers in an unbreakable grip. "You look breathtaking," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over her again, lingering on her lips. "Even more so than I remembered." A thrill shot through her, a response to his words, but even more so to the way he said them, the profound sincerity in his tone. She felt herself blush deeper, a delightful warmth spreading through her. "And you, Julian," she replied, her voice gaining a little more strength, "look precisely as dangerous as I recall." He chuckled, a low, husky sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Is that a complaint, Alara?" "Never," she breathed, her eyes never leaving his. "Merely an observation." He reached out a hand, slowly, deliberately. His fingers, long and elegant, brushed against her cheek, sending a jolt of electricity through her. His touch was feather-light, yet it held the weight of years of longing, of unspoken desires, of a connection that transcended mere physical attraction. He cupped her jaw, his thumb tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbone. "I've missed you," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, his eyes searching hers, delving deep. "Every waking moment, every lonely night." Her own eyes welled up, not with sadness, but with the sheer overwhelming emotion of the moment. "And you, Julian," she confessed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "More than words can say." He leaned in, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she had no desire to. Her heart was pounding, a frantic drum urging him closer. His breath, warm and tasting faintly of the whiskey she'd smelled, ghosted over her lips. The anticipation was exquisite, a sweet torture that promised an even sweeter release. His lips finally met hers, a soft tentative touch at first, a question more than a demand. It was a gentle exploration, a reacquaintance, a silent acknowledgement of all the time that had passed, all the space that had separated them. But even in that gentle touch, there was an underlying current, a powerful surge of passion waiting to be unleashed. Alara responded instantly, her lips parting slightly, inviting him deeper. His hand, still cupping her jaw, tightened imperceptibly, anchoring her. The kiss deepened, slowly at first, then with an escalating intensity that stole her breath. It was a kiss that tasted of rain and yearning, of memory and promise. It was a homecoming. He pulled her closer, his other hand sliding around her waist, drawing her against the hard planes of his body. She felt the dampness of his coat through the silk of her robe, but she didn't care. All she registered was the exhilarating press of his chest against her breasts, the intoxicating scent of him filling her lungs, the desperate hunger in his kiss. Her hands found their way to his wet hair, her fingers tangling in the dark strands, holding him to her as if her very life depended on it. The kiss became a torrent, a fierce, consuming fire that obliterated everything else. Their bodies moved together, a slow, sensual sway that spoke of years of shared intimacy, of a profound understanding that needed no words. He deepened the kiss further, his tongue seeking hers, intertwining in a dance of pure, unadulterated passion. Alara felt a moan rise from deep within her, a sound of utter surrender, of exquisite pleasure. When he finally broke the kiss, it was only by an inch, their foreheads resting against each other, their breaths mingling, ragged and fast. His eyes were dark, clouded with desire, and she knew her own mirrored his. "Velvet night," he whispered, his voice hoarse, his thumb caressing her jawline. "It always was for us." He looked around the elegant room, at the soft glow of the fire, the rich fabrics, the carefully chosen ambience. "You set the perfect stage, my Alara." "For you," she breathed, still reeling from the force of his kiss. "Always for you." He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that promised untold delights. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached for the delicate silk tie of her robe. His fingers, surprisingly steady despite the tremor she felt running through him, untied the knot with a practiced ease. The silk parted, revealing the delicate lace chemise beneath, the soft swell of her breasts, the pale skin beneath the lamplight. His gaze dropped, lingering on the valley between her breasts, then rising slowly back to her eyes. The hunger in his expression was undeniable, a raw, primal need that mirrored her own. "Let the night begin," he murmured, his voice a low growl, and then he bent his head. Not for her lips this time, but for the soft skin of her neck, just beneath her ear. His warm breath, his soft bite, sent a fresh wave of exquisite sensation through her, and she arched her back, offering herself to him completely. This was only the beginning. His warm breath, his soft bite, sent a fresh wave of exquisite sensation through her, and she arched her back, offering herself to him completely. This was only the beginning. He moved from the tender skin beneath her ear, his lips grazing a path down her throat, tasting the delicate pulse that hammered wildly there. A low moan escaped her, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure that seemed to vibrate through their joined bodies. Her fingers, still tangled in his thick hair, tightened, urging him closer, desperate for more of his heat. His touch. The scent of him, a heady mix of subtle spice, clean linen, and something uniquely masculine, filled her senses, intoxicating her, pulling her deeper into the delicious vortex of the moment. His hands, which had been resting on her waist, now slid upwards, tracing the curve of her spine beneath the silk of her dress. Each slow, deliberate movement was a spark, igniting a trail of fire in its wake. When his thumbs brushed the delicate lace of her bra strap, a shiver separate from the general tremor that now encompassed her, ran through her. He paused, his lips still pressed to her collarbone, and she felt the rumble of a soft chuckle against her skin. "Impatient, are we?" he murmured, his voice a husky whisper that sent delicious frissons down her spine. She could only manage a breathless laugh, a sound that was more sigh than anything else. "Terribly," she admitted, her voice a little rough, completely undone. He straightened, a slow smile playing on his lips, his eyes dark with a desire that mirrored her own. "Good," he said, the single word a promise, a challenge. His gaze dropped to the elegant buttons that ran down the front of her dress, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "May I?" She nodded, her breath catching in her throat, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She watched, mesmerized, as his long, skilled fingers went to work. Each button, released with deliberate slowness, felt like an eternity. He didn't just unfasten them. He lingered, his fingertips brushing the sensitive skin beneath, sending fresh jolts of electricity through her. When the top 2 buttons were undone, he pushed the fabric aside just enough to press a soft kiss to the hollow of her throat, right where the delicate lace of her camisole began. The dress began to fall open, revealing the swell of her breasts, barely contained by the delicate lace of her chemise. His eyes, dark and intense, devoured the sight. Her cheeks flushed, a warmth spreading through her, not of embarrassment, but of a profound, exhilarating awareness. She felt beautiful under his gaze, desired in a way that stirred something ancient and wild within her. He finished with the buttons, then gently eased the silk from her shoulders, letting it pool around her elbows. The cool air on her bared skin was a stark contrast to the heat building within her. He stepped back just slightly, giving her room, yet his eyes never left hers, holding her captive in their depth. The dress slipped further, revealing the delicate straps of her chemise, the soft curve of her collarbones, the elegant line of her shoulders. "You are exquisite," he breathed, the words a reverent whisper, his gaze tracing every revealed curve. He reached out, his hand incredibly warm as he cupped her elbow, his thumb stroking the soft skin of her inner arm. The simple touch was enough to make her knees feel weak, a liquid heat pooling low in her belly. "And you," she managed, her voice barely audible, "are torturous." He chuckled again, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through her. "Only to savor the moment," he countered, his smile widening. He led her back a single step, until the edge of the bed brushed against the backs of her legs. Without breaking eye contact, he knelt before her, a move that surprised and thrilled her. Her breath hitched as he took her hands, bringing her knuckles to his lips for a soft kiss, then pressing his cheek against them. Her fingers instinctively threaded into his hair, feeling the silken texture against her skin. He looked up at her, his expression a potent blend of adoration and fierce hunger. "Let me," he whispered, his voice laced with tender command. He began to ease the dress down further, his hands moving with exquisite care, stroking her calves, her knees, the soft skin of her thighs as the fabric gathered around her ankles. She stood still, utterly captivated, allowing him to undress her, each touch a deliberate, sensual exploration. When the silk finally pulled at her feet, a shimmering circle on the floor, she stepped out of it, feeling lighter, freer, yet more vulnerable than ever before. She stood before him now in nothing but her delicate lace chemise and matching briefs, the fine material clinging to her curves, offering tantalizing glimpses of the skin beneath. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken desire. He rose to his feet, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the gentle swell of her breasts, the narrowness of her waist, the curve of her hips. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice a low growl that sent shivers of anticipation through her. He reached for her, not to pull her into an embrace, but to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His eyes bored into hers, searching, revealing the depth of his feelings. "I've wanted this night for so long." "As have I," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, her own hands rising to rest on his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him beneath the fabric of his shirt. Her fingers began to explore, tracing the firm contours of his pectorals, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palm. The scent of him, close and intoxicating, filled her lungs. He lowered his head, his lips brushing hers in a feather-light touch, a promise of what was to come. "But first," he whispered against her mouth, "let me truly see you." With a gentle touch, he unfastened the tiny pearl buttons that held her chemise together, one by one. Each release was a tantalizing revelation. The lace parted, slowly, teasingly, until the soft curve of her breasts was bared to his gaze. Her nipples, already tight with anticipation, peaked, yearning for his touch. His eyes, dark and intense, drank in the sight, a soft groan rumbling in his chest. He pushed the camise straps from her shoulders, letting the garment fall to her waist, leaving her bare from the waist up. She stood before him, her chest rising and falling with quick, shallow breaths, her senses acutely aware of every subtle shift in the atmosphere, every nuance of his gaze. She watched him too, her eyes tracing the strong lines of his jaw, the curve of his lips, the intensity in his dark eyes. He reached out, his fingers trembling slightly as he cupped her breast, his thumb brushing over her sensitive nipple. A gasp escaped her, a sound of pure, unadulterated pleasure. The warmth of his hand, the gentle pressure, sent a searing heat straight to her core, making her arch into his touch, a silent plea for more. He took her other breast in his hand, his touch equally reverent and possessive, his fingers circling the engorged tips, teasing, tormenting. "Beautiful," he breathed, his voice thick with desire. He bent his head, not to her lips, but to the valley between her breasts, pressing a soft, warm kiss there. Then his lips moved lower, drawing a slow, exquisite path towards one waiting peak. She braced herself, her fingers digging into his shoulders as his warm mouth finally closed over her, a soft, suckling drawl that sent shockwaves through her entire being. Her head fell back, a soft moan escaping her throat. He continued to draw on her gently, then with more intensity his tongue laving the sensitive skin, sending spirals of pleasure deeper and deeper into her. She felt herself melting, her knees threatening to give way. The world narrowed to the sensations of his mouth on her breast, the exquisite tension building, the frantic beat of her own heart. When he finally pulled away, her breath came in ragged gasps, her body trembling with a delicious ache. He looked at her, his eyes dark with a triumphant passion, a faint sheen of moisture on his lips. "Now it's your turn," he murmured, his gaze dropping to his own chest. Her hands, emboldened by his touch, went to the buttons of his shirt. Her fingers, less practiced than his, fumbled slightly, but her desire lent them a fierce determination. She undid each button, her eyes meeting his with every release, a silent conversation passing between them. When the last button was free, she pushed the fabric wide, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, dusted with dark, soft hair. He was magnificent. The taut muscles of his pectorals, the defined lines of his abdomen, the powerful breadth of his shoulders. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they made first contact with his skin. It was warm, firm, and utterly exhilarating. She splayed her hands across his chest, feeling the powerful rhythm of his heart beneath her palms, a frantic drumbeat that matched her own. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his sternum, tasting the faint saltiness of his skin. The scent of him, raw and masculine, enveloped her. Her lips trailed higher, tracing the path of the hair on his chest, feeling the soft prickle against her sensitive skin. She kissed his collarbone, then moved to his shoulder, her teeth lightly nipping the muscle there. He groaned, a deep, guttural sound that thrilled her to her core. Her hands moved lower, exploring the flat planes of his stomach, the subtle flex of his muscles beneath her touch. He stood utterly still, allowing her to explore, his eyes closed for a moment, savoring her touch. She felt a profound sense of power, of connection, in this intimate exploration. He opened his eyes, a molten intensity in their depths. "The bed, my love," he whispered, his voice thick with unfulfilled desire. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, a gasp of surprise escaping her. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, pressing herself against his strong, warm body. The remaining barrier of her briefs felt almost unbearable now, a thin layer separating her from the ultimate connection she craved. He carried her the few steps to the bed, laying her gently down on the cool, crisp sheets. The soft pillows cradled her head as he settled beside her, propped on one elbow, his eyes never leaving hers. The dim light of the room cast long shadows, enhancing the intimacy of the moment. He reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her hip, then the delicate lace of her briefs. "This too," he murmured, his voice a low growl, "must go." She nodded, her breath catching as his fingers, so skilled and deliberate, slipped beneath the lace. He eased the fabric down, slowly, teasingly, until it joined the discarded chemise on the floor. Now, she was completely bare before him, vulnerable, exposed, and utterly alive. A flush spread across her skin, a deep blush of arousal and anticipation. He moved closer, his own shirt discarded somewhere along the way, leaving him bare-chested. The contrast of his warm, firm skin against hers was exquisite. He ran his hand from her hip, up her side, across her ribs, until his fingers brushed against the underside of her breast. He cupped it gently, his thumb stroking the sensitive peak, eliciting a soft moan from her. "You are perfection," he whispered, his voice full of reverence. He leaned in, pressing a lingering kiss to her lips, a deep, consuming kiss that left her breathless and yearning for more. His tongue sought hers, a sensual dance that mirrored the unspoken desires of their bodies. Her hands found his waist, then his hips, pulling him closer, desperate to feel more of him against her. He responded instantly, pressing his body against hers, the hard planes of his chest against her soft breasts, the firm line of his abdomen against her belly. She could feel the undeniable evidence of his desire pressing against her thigh, a potent reminder of the journey they were on. He shifted, rising slightly, and she felt the cool air for a moment, before his body descended again, warm and heavy, settling between her legs. Her thighs parted instinctively, welcoming him, eager for the full weight of him, the promise of intimate connection. His lips found her neck again, tracing a path down to her shoulder, then further, to the soft skin of her inner arm, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. Her fingers threaded into his hair, pulling him closer still, her hips beginning to move in a slow, sinuous rhythm, a primal invitation. His body responded, pressing deeper against her, a soft groan rumbling in his chest. He lifted his head, his eyes burning into hers, a raw, untamed desire reflected in their depths. "Are you ready, my love?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion, his breath warm against her lips. "More than ready," she whispered back, her voice barely audible, her body aching with a longing that bordered on pain. "I'm yours." He lowered his head, not for a kiss this time, but to whisper fervent words against her ear, promises of pleasure, declarations of devotion. His hands slid beneath her, cupping her bottom, lifting her slightly, pressing her more firmly against him. The friction was intoxicating, sending dizzying waves of sensation through her. Her legs wrapped around him, drawing him even closer, her body arching into his, seeking the ultimate communion. He shifted again, aligning himself, and she felt the exquisite pressure, the undeniable presence of him at her entrance. A gasp caught in her throat, a mix of anticipation and pure, unadulterated pleasure. He paused, a testament to his control, his gaze locked with hers, searching for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of doubt. But there was none, only fierce desire and an eager invitation in her eyes. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead against hers, their breaths mingling, their hearts beating as one. "Just breathe with me," he murmured, his voice a low, steadying rumble. And then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he began to enter her. It was a sensation of exquisite fullness, of stretching, of being utterly consumed. Her eyes fluttered closed, a soft moan escaping her lips as her body welcomed him, enveloped him. The world dissolved into a maelstrom of touch, scent, and raw, primal sensation. He filled her completely, slowly, reverently, until he was deep inside her, their bodies finally gloriously joined. She felt a shudder ripple through him, a deep sigh escaping his lips as he settled within her. Their bodies were pressed together, skin to skin, heart to heart. He didn't move yet, simply held her close, allowing them both to adjust, to savor the profound intimacy of their union. Her hands clutched his shoulders, her fingers digging into the firm muscle, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The heat that bloomed between them was overwhelming, consuming. He lifted his head, his eyes heavy-lidded with passion, but still holding hers in a fierce, possessive grip. "Home," he whispered, the single word laden with a depth of emotion that brought tears to her eyes. "You feel like home." She couldn't speak, only nodded, her throat tight with emotion, her body trembling with the sheer intensity of the moment. This was more than just physical pleasure. It was a profound connection, a merging of souls as much as bodies. He moved then, a slow, deep thrust that made her arch her back, a soft cry escaping her lips. The rhythm began, gentle at first, then building in intensity, a timeless dance of desire and longing. Each thrust was a deeper plunge, each withdrawal a teasing promise of return. She met him stroke for stroke, her hips rising to meet his, her legs tightening around his waist, pulling him deeper still. The bed creaked softly with their movements, a whispered testament to their passion. The air grew thick with the scent of their mingled bodies, the sounds of their ragged breathing, their soft moans and gasps. He leaned down, burying his face in the curve of her neck, his lips pressing fervent kisses there as he continued their ancient rhythm. His hands moved from her hips to her waist, then higher, cupping her breasts, his thumbs stroking her sensitive nipples, adding another layer of exquisite sensation to the already overwhelming pleasure. She felt herself spiraling, rising higher and higher in waves of pure sensation. The world was a blur, a kaleidoscope of pleasure, her mind empty of everything but him, their bodies, the delicious friction, the overwhelming heat. Her muscles tightened, her core clenched around him, drawing a low growl from his throat. The tension built, a sweet, agonizing ache that permeated her entire being, promising release, demanding it. She was on the precipice, teetering on the edge of something vast and overwhelming, something utterly beautiful and consuming. And she wanted to fall. She desperately wanted to fall. And fall she did. The world shattered, then reformed in a kaleidoscope of dazzling light and profound sensation. A gasp tore from her throat, raw and involuntary, as the exquisite pressure coiled tighter, then exploded into a cascade of molten pleasure. It wasn't just her body, but her very soul that unraveled, a tremor that started deep within her core and vibrated outwards, making every nerve ending sing. Her hips arched fiercely, instinctively, meeting his thrust with a desperate urgency, drawing a guttural moan from him that reverberated through her bones. His name, a ragged whisper, escaped her lips as the waves crashed over her, one after another, each more intense than the last. She felt his own release then, a deep, powerful shudder that coursed through him, his body tensing, then collapsing against hers with a heavy, satisfying weight. He buried his face in the curve of her neck, his breath hot against her skin, a low, primal sound rumbling in his chest. For a long moment, there was nothing but the ragged rhythm of their breathing, the frantic beat of their hearts slowly calming, the delicious, heavy thrum of satiation. Their bodies were still melded, sweat slicked and tangled, a perfect fit. She felt boneless, utterly spent, yet exquisitely alive. Her arms, which had been clamped around his back with a fierce possessiveness, now loosened, her fingers tracing the lean, hard lines of his shoulders. He shifted slightly, lifting his head just enough to press a soft kiss to her temple, then her cheek, his lips lingering at the corner of her mouth. She opened her eyes slowly, the room still a soft blur of moonlight and shadow. His eyes, dark and intense, met hers, filled with a warmth that made her breath catch all over again. There was a silent language exchanged, a profound understanding that transcended words. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, a gentle caress in itself. He didn't move, just held her close, their bodies still joined, the lingering warmth a delicious reminder of their journey. She felt utterly cherished, utterly seen. It was a feeling she hadn't realized she was starving for until this very moment. A soft sigh escaped her, a sound of pure contentment. She nestled closer, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm tightening around her. The balmy night air drifted through the open balcony doors, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and the distant murmur of the city. A soft, hushed symphony. Time seemed to lose all meaning, dissolving into a timeless space where only their shared breath and the gentle beat of their hearts existed. Slowly, reluctantly, he withdrew, a soft gasp escaping her as the exquisite fullness left her. But he didn't move far, just rolled onto his side, pulling her against him so she was spooned into his front, his arm coming around her waist to hold her tight. He pressed a kiss to the nape of her neck, his lips tracing the delicate curve of her spine, sending shivers, not of desire, but of pure tenderness, through her. "Comfortable," he whispered, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "Perfect," she breathed, her voice still a little shaky. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, a quiet joy that glowed in her chest. This was more than just physical release, it was a profound connection, a merging of souls as much as bodies. He began to stroke her hair, his fingers gently threading through the silken strands, a soothing rhythm that lulled her. She felt herself drifting, suspended in a delicious state of semi-consciousness, wrapped in his warmth and scent. It was a kind of intimacy she hadn't experienced in a very long time. This quiet, post-passion closeness, where vulnerability was embraced, and every touch spoke volumes. After a while she stirred, a soft stretch, and turned in his arms to face him. The moonlight now bathed his face, highlighting the strong planes of his cheekbones, the faint stubble along his jaw, the gentle curve of his lips. He looked utterly serene, a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a raw tenderness that made her heart ache in the most beautiful way. She reached up, her fingers lightly tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her touch. He leaned into it, his eyes closing for a moment, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You have no idea," he murmured, his voice husky, "how long I've wanted to do this with you." Her breath hitched. The quiet admission delivered in the hushed intimacy of the night resonated deep within her. It wasn't just a fleeting desire, there was history. Anticipation, a depth of feeling she was only just beginning to comprehend. "I think I might have an idea," she whispered back, a soft smile gracing her lips. She had felt it too, that unspoken pull, the simmering tension that had finally ignited. He opened his eyes, a playful glint returning to their depths. "Oh?" he challenged softly, his thumb tracing the curve of her hip, sending a fresh wave of warmth through her. "Tell me." She chuckled softly, a low, throaty sound. "A sense, a feeling, like a story waiting to be written, and tonight, we finally turned the first page." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a soft, lingering kiss. It was slow, tender, a world away from the consuming passion of moments before, yet just as potent. It tasted of lingering desire, of whispered promises, of a future yet unwritten. "A beautiful story," he murmured against her mouth, "and I intend to savor every chapter." His hand, which had been resting on her hip, now began a slow, deliberate journey. His fingers brushed against the sensitive skin of her inner thigh, sending a delicious tremor through her. Her breath hitched. The embers of desire, though banked, were far from extinguished. In fact, they seemed to be stirring, fanned by his light, knowing touch. "Are you real?" she whispered, half joking, half serious, as if this entire evening was too perfect to be true. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her. "As real as the heat you feel right now?" he countered, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. His fingers continued their exploration, moving higher, closer, until they brushed the delicate curls at the apex of her thighs. A soft moan escaped her as a fresh wave of heat bloomed within her. The tender aftermath was slowly giving way to a new, tantalizing arousal. Her body, though still heavy with satiation, remembered the exquisite pleasure, craved it anew. "What is it about you?" she whispered, her voice a little breathless, her eyes darkening with renewed desire. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, sending shivers down her spine. "Perhaps it's the way you look at me," he murmured, his voice a seductive rasp, "like I'm the only man in the world. Or the way your body responds to mine, without hesitation, without reservation." His fingers found her, a gentle, exploratory touch that sent an electric current through her. She gasped, arching into his touch, her hips instinctively tilting. "You make me feel utterly undone," she confessed, her voice barely audible. His smile widened, a slow, sensual curve of his lips. "Good," he breathed, his touch growing more confident, more demanding. "Because you do the same to me." He shifted again, pulling her even closer, their bodies pressing together from chest to thigh. The friction of their skin, the renewed scent of their combined passion, was intoxicating. He began to kiss her again, deeper this time, his tongue tangling with hers in a slow, sensual dance that mirrored the rhythm he was now coaxing from her body with his fingers. She found herself responding with a primal urgency, her hand reaching for him, her fingers closing around his hardened shaft. A low groan rumbled in his throat, a testament to her power over him. It was a delicious reversal, a shared exploration of pleasure that felt both familiar and brand new. He broke the kiss, pulling back just enough to gaze into her eyes, his own burning with desire. "Let's not rush this time," he whispered, his voice thick with longing. "Let's savor every moment, every touch, every breath." She nodded, breathless, her eyes locked with his. The thought of a slow, unhurried journey back to the precipice was almost as intoxicating as the fall itself. He moved then, gently guiding her onto her back, his body hovering above hers. Moonlight streamed through the open doors, painting silver stripes across their skin, illuminating the sensual landscape of their entwined forms. He leaned down, his lips trailing a path of fire from her jawline to the hollow of her throat, then lower, to the sensitive skin of her collarbone. A sigh escaped her lips as his touch ignited a fresh wave of sensation. His lips were soft, yet firm, teasing, tasting, exploring. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if he had all the time in the world, and for this moment, they did. His tongue flickered out, tracing the delicate curve of her shoulder, causing goosebumps to prickle her skin. She arched into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, gently pulling him closer, urging him on. Her body was humming, a low, steady thrum of anticipation. Every nerve ending was alive, tingling, waiting for his next touch, his next kiss. He descended further, his breath warm against her skin as he reached her breasts. Her nipples, already firm and aching, tightened further as his lips closed over one, drawing a sharp gasp from her. He suckled gently, then more firmly, his tongue laving the sensitive peak, sending delicious currents of pleasure shooting straight to her core. She whimpered, her back arching off the bed, her fingers digging into his shoulders. It was an exquisite torture, a slow, sensual awakening that pushed her closer and closer to the edge. He moved between them, his gaze never leaving hers, watching her reaction, feeding off her pleasure as much as she fed off his. His mouth moved to her other breast, giving it the same devoted attention, and she felt herself dissolving, melting into the mattress beneath her. The world outside the room had faded completely, leaving only the two of them, their breath mingling, their bodies entwined in a dance, as old as time itself. His hand, meanwhile, had begun its own journey. It moved from her hip, gliding over the curve of her stomach, brushing against the delicate skin of her inner thigh once more. This time, there was no hesitation, no question. His fingers found their target, a soft, teasing touch that promised so much more. He stroked her gently, slowly, his thumb brushing against her clitoris, sending shivers through her entire being. She gasped, her hips lifting instinctively, silently begging for more. He took his time, learning her rhythms, understanding her responses, each touch a carefully orchestrated note in their symphony of pleasure. So responsive, he murmured against her skin, his voice thick with desire, his eyes dark with a hunger that mirrored her own. Every touch, every breath. You feel everything, don't you? Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Everything. She was utterly exposed, utterly vulnerable, yet felt safer than she had in years. With him, there was no need for pretense, no need for guards. She could simply be. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He continued his exquisite torment, his fingers dancing over her, teasing, circling, building the pressure slowly, deliciously. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps, her body beginning to tremble with the intensity of it all. She felt herself rising again, soaring towards that familiar precipice, but this time, it was a slower climb, a more drawn-out ascent. Each stroke, each caress, was a step higher, a deeper immersion into the swirling vortex of sensation. She could feel the tension coiling tighter and tighter within her, a beautiful, agonizing ache that promised release. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, not quite kissing her, just tasting the air between them. Look at me, he whispered, his eyes burning into hers, full of a fierce, possessive tenderness. She met his gaze, her own eyes wide and unfocused, glazed with desire. In their depths, she saw her own raw longing reflected back, amplified. It was a profound connection, a shared vulnerability that deepened the intimacy of the moment beyond anything she had ever known. He shifted slightly, his knee coming between her thighs, gently parting them further. She opened for him, instinctively, eagerly. His fingers continued their masterful work, quickening their pace, increasing the pressure, drawing a guttural moan from her. She arched her back, her fingers clenching in the silk sheets beneath them, her body a taut bowstring, vibrating with exquisite tension. The world narrowed to this single point of pleasure, this singular man, this overwhelming sensation. Her hips began to rock, an involuntary rhythm, meeting his every touch with a desperate need. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his voice a low, seductive rumble that sent shivers through her. You are exquisite, he breathed, absolutely breathtaking. The words, whispered in the throes of passion, were like fuel to the fire. Her body convulsed, a wave of tremors starting deep within her, spreading outwards, making her gasp and cry out his name. She was on the edge, teetering, about to fall into the abyss of pleasure once more. He pulled back slightly, just enough to look at her, his eyes dark with a triumphant desire. "Not yet," he whispered, a playful glint in his eyes. "Let's stretch this out, shall we?" And then, just as she thought she couldn't take another moment of the delicious torment, he lowered himself fully between her legs, not entering her, but pressing his hardened shaft against her clitoris, rotating his hips slowly, deliberately, creating an entirely new kind of friction, an entirely new kind of exquisite pressure. She gasped, her body arching violently, her muscles clenching around him. It was an overwhelming sensation, pushing her even further, right to the very brink. The feeling was so intense, so all-consuming, that she could barely breathe, barely think. Her mind was a delicious blank, filled only with the feel of him, the intoxicating scent of their bodies, the overwhelming heat. "Please," she whimpered, her voice a raw plea, her hands gripping his hair, pulling his mouth down to hers for a desperate, hungry kiss. He met her kiss with equal fervor, his tongue tangling with hers, his hips continuing their slow, intoxicating grind. The world spun, a vortex of pleasure, and she felt herself spiraling, faster and faster, towards an inevitable, beautiful explosion. The tension built, a sweet, agonizing ache that permeated her entire being, promising release, demanding it. She was on the precipice, teetering on the edge of something vast and overwhelming, something utterly beautiful and consuming. And she wanted to fall. She desperately wanted to fall, knowing that this time, the fall would be even deeper, even more profound. She could feel the first tremors beginning, a deep, delicious shiver that promised everything. She could feel the first tremors beginning, a deep, delicious shiver that promised everything. It started as a low hum, a vibration deep within her core, spreading outwards like ripples in a warm pond. His hands, still firm on her hips, anchored her to the moment, while his lips, now trailing lazy, intoxicating kisses along her jawline, whispered encouragement she couldn't quite decipher, but understood implicitly. Each brush of his stubble, each gentle suckle, sent an electrical current through her, feeding the burgeoning storm. Her breath hitched, a soft gasp escaping her lips as the tremors intensified, becoming a rhythmic pulsing, an insistent drumbeat echoing the frantic thrum of her heart. She arched into him, a primal, unbidden movement, seeking deeper pressure, more contact, more of the exquisite friction that was pushing her further and further over the edge. Her fingers tangled in his hair, tightened, pulling him closer, her nails lightly scoring his scalp, a desperate plea for more. He responded instantly, a low growl rumbling in his chest as he met her urgency with his own, his rhythm becoming a powerful driving force. The world outside their intimate sphere ceased to exist. There was only the heat of their skin, the scent of their mingled arousal, the dizzying rush of sensation that consumed her. The sweet ache became an unbearable pleasure, a fiery current coursing through every nerve ending, coiling tighter and tighter in her belly, pulling her taut. And then, the fall. It wasn't a gentle descent, but a magnificent, free-falling plunge into an abyss of pure sensation. The first wave crashed over her, a dizzying surge that stole her breath and shattered her composure. Her body convulsed, a moan tearing from her throat, raw and uninhibited. She cried out his name, a desperate fragmented whisper, as the pleasure became too vast, too intense to contain. Each ripple that followed was stronger, deeper, drawing her further into the exquisite maelstrom. Her vision blurred, kaleidoscopic patterns dancing behind her eyelids as her entire being vibrated with the force of it. She felt his body stiffen above her, heard his own ragged groan as he held on, riding the wave with her, his release mirroring her own in its intensity and depth. The world dissolved into a brilliant, blinding white, a beautiful explosion of light and feeling that consumed her utterly. Slowly, exquisitely, the waves receded, leaving her breathless, trembling, and utterly spent. Her muscles quivered, a delicious aftermath of the profound release. She lay limp beneath him, her chest heaving, her heart still hammering a wild tattoo against her ribs. The air was thick with their mingled scent, a sweet, musky perfume of spent passion. He collapsed beside her, pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her, holding her tightly against his sweat-slicked skin. His breath was ragged against her ear, his lips brushing the sensitive skin of her temple. "My love," he whispered, the words thick with emotion. "My beautiful love." She couldn't speak, only burrowed deeper into his embrace, her fingers weakly clutching the skin of his back. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a deep, abiding contentment that spread warmth through every cell of her body. It wasn't just the physical release. It was the overwhelming feeling of being utterly seen, desired, cherished, and loved. This was what she had yearned for. This complete and utter surrender. This beautiful vulnerability shared with the man who held her heart. He shifted slightly, propping himself up on an elbow, his gaze soft and adoring as he looked down at her. His thumb brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, tracing the curve of her cheekbone. "You're exquisite," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her. "Absolutely breathtaking." A shy smile touched her lips, a blush rising to her cheeks despite herself. She felt beautiful, radiant, in his eyes. You make me feel that way," she managed, her voice still a little shaky. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then her lips, a gentle, tender caress that held none of the previous urgency, only a profound affection. "That's because you are," he corrected, his eyes twinkling. "Always have been." They lay in comfortable silence for a long time, their bodies entwined, the only sounds the soft whoosh of the distant ocean and the steady beat of their hearts. The moon, a sliver of silver, cast long dancing shadows across the room, painting everything in shades of muted gray and gentle light. The air had cooled slightly, but the warmth between their bodies kept the chill at bay. Eventually, he stirred, pressing another kiss to her hair. "Are you hungry?" he asked, his voice a soft murmur. "I could make us something." She laughed softly, a low, throaty sound. "Only for you." He chuckled, a rich, warm sound that vibrated through her. "Flatterer. But I meant food. Would you prefer to stay tangled like this all night?" "Tangled, definitely tangled," she said, nestling closer. "But perhaps a glass of water." He carefully disentangled himself, a look of reluctance on his face. "Just water," he teased, his eyes sparkling. "No champagne this time?" "Only if you promise to bring it back to bed," she countered, pulling the sheet up to her chin, though she knew he'd seen every inch of her. He disappeared into the kitchen, and she heard the soft clinking of glasses. The brief moment of separation made her realize just how deeply she craved his presence, his touch. When he returned, he was wearing a pair of dark boxer briefs, his body still glowing with the aftermath of their passion. He held 2 glasses of water, cool and refreshing, and a small plate of the artisanal chocolates they'd bought earlier. "A little something extra," he said, offering her a piece. "For energy." She took it, the dark chocolate melting on her tongue, a bittersweet counterpoint to the lingering sweetness in her body. They sat propped against the pillows, sipping their water, sharing the chocolates, and speaking in soft, hushed tones. They talked about nothing in particular. The day, the beauty of the cottage, the plans for tomorrow. But every word was imbued with a deeper meaning, a quiet affirmation of their shared intimacy. "I love this," she confessed, leaning her head on his shoulder, his arm instinctively wrapping around her. "Just this, being with you." "Me too, my love," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her hair. "More than you know." A comfortable silence descended again, but this time, a new kind of tension began to build, slow and gentle, like the tide slowly turning. It wasn't the frantic, demanding urgency of before, but a soft, pervasive warmth, a desire to prolong the connection, to explore it in a different, more languid way. His fingers began to trace lazy patterns on her arm, sending shivers down her spine that were less about arousal, and more about pure, delicious affection. She tilted her head back, meeting his gaze. His eyes, dark and expressive, held a question, a gentle invitation. She smiled, a soft, affirmative curve of her lips. He didn't rush. This time, it was a slow, deliberate unfolding, a testament to their established connection. He laid her back against the pillows, carefully, tenderly, his movements imbued with a reverence that made her heart swell. He leaned over her, his lips finding hers, a long, deep, unhurried kiss that tasted of chocolate and desire. His hands roamed over her body, not with the demanding urgency of earlier, but with a lingering, exploring touch. They traced the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips, the soft skin of her inner thigh. Each touch was a caress, a reacquaintance, a silent conversation between their bodies that spoke of trust and profound affection. She responded in kind, her hands gliding over the taut muscles of his back, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength of his frame. She reveled in the feel of him, the familiar scent, the taste of his mouth on hers. This was intimacy distilled, a slow burn that promised a different kind of ecstasy, one built on shared history and deep, abiding love. He moved between her legs, slowly, deliberately, giving her time to adjust, to invite him in. She opened to him, a silent welcome, her body already tingling with anticipation. He entered her with a sigh, a soft sound of contentment that mirrored her own. This time, there was no frantic thrusting, no desperate race to the peak. It was a slow, deep communion, a rhythm that was steady and profound. Each stroke was an affirmation, a gentle reminder of their bond. He moved within her with a languid grace, his eyes never leaving hers, communicating a world of tenderness and desire. She wrapped her legs around his waist, drawing him in deeper, wanting to feel every inch of him, to absorb him into her very being. The pleasure built slowly, a delicious, drawn-out crescendo. It was a quieter fire, one that burned steadily, warming her from the inside out. Her breath came in soft gasps, her fingers clutching his shoulders, not in desperation, but in pure, unadulterated bliss. She could feel her body responding, the gentle clenching, the building pressure that was leading her to another exquisite precipice. This climax was different. It wasn't an explosive, shattering force, but a slow, delicious blooming, a wave that swelled and broke in a series of gentle, exquisite ripples. She arched into him, a soft cry escaping her lips as her body trembled with the release. He held her close, his own movements a slow, sustained rhythm that prolonged the sensation, drawing her further into the soft, yielding warmth. They moved together, a seamless dance of bodies and souls, until he too reached his peak, a deep groan rumbling in his chest as he buried his face in her neck, holding her tightly as the last tremors subsided. This time, there was no immediate collapse, no breathless exhaustion. Instead, a profound sense of peace enveloped them, a deep, quiet contentment that permeated every fiber of her being. They remained entwined, his weight comforting, his breath warm against her skin. "Perfect," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her hands stroking his hair. "Absolutely perfect." He lifted his head, his eyes soft and heavy-lidded with satisfaction. "More than perfect, my love," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Absolute magic." He shifted, pulling the duvet over them, tucking them in snugly. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the warmth of his body against hers. The moonlight still filtered through the window, painting the room in soft hues, but now, a profound sense of calm had settled over them. "I love you," she whispered, the words heartfelt and true, a quiet promise in the hushed stillness of the night. He tightened his embrace. "And I you." More than words can say. Sleep came easily then, a gentle descent into blissful unconsciousness, cradled in his arms, her body humming with a deep, lingering satisfaction. The dreams that night were sweet and vivid, filled with the warmth of his touch, the scent of his skin, and the undeniable magic of their shared love. When she awoke, the first rays of dawn were painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gold. She was still nestled against him, his arm a warm weight across her waist, his steady breathing a comforting rhythm beside her ear. A soft smile touched her lips. She stirred, stretching languidly, feeling utterly rested and profoundly happy. His arm tightened instinctively, and she heard a soft groan. "Morning, sleepyhead," she whispered, turning her head to kiss his shoulder. He blinked, his eyes slowly opening, a slow smile spreading across his face as he saw her. "Morning, my love," he mumbled, his voice still husky with sleep. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "Best way to wake up." They lay there for a while, just holding each other, watching the light slowly brighten the room. The scent of coffee began to drift from downstairs, a gentle reminder of the world outside their bedroom cocoon. "Coffee?" he asked, his voice still a little gruff, but filled with affection. "Sounds wonderful," she agreed, reluctantly disentangling herself. As they got up, moving around the room, getting dressed in comfortable clothes, there was a new lightness in their movements, a deeper ease in their interaction. The night had not just been about passion. It had been about reaffirming their connection, deepening their understanding of each other, and solidifying the love that had been steadily growing between them. He brewed the coffee, and they sat on the small porch swing, mugs warming their hands, watching the sun climb higher, painting the ocean in shimmering silver. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the salty scent of the sea. "This," she said, leaning her head on his shoulder, "is everything I ever dreamed of." He squeezed her hand. "And more, I hope, because we're just getting started." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with happiness and a profound sense of belonging. He leaned down and kissed her, a long, tender kiss that promised a future filled with more moments like these, moments of passion, intimacy, and a love that was as deep and boundless as the ocean before them. The night had ended, but their story, rich with promise and desire, had just begun.